Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the section 3 of Jessica's Leader Forum 2022. This section, we're talking about women in tech. We have 3 speakers here. We have Ms. Jessica Executive Vice Chairman of China Media, Ms. Lisa Moore, Research and Advocacy Director of the Women's Foundation, and Belinda Esterhammer, Co-founder and Chair of Women in Tech APAC. Welcome, ladies. During this section, the ladies will be talking about women in tech and community. We'll be taking questions in the Q&A box later. Please, if you do have any questions, drop in the Q&A box. We will pass it on to the ladies at the end of the section where we take all the Q&As. So ladies, please go ahead.
Thank you, Kelvin. Welcome, Belinda. Welcome, Lisa. I think it's a great opportunity today for us to share a little about the work we do in building women's communities and particularly for women in tech. So I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction about the JESS Network first. As some of you may or may not be aware of, JESSICA, the magazine, was founded in the year 2000, so it's a millennial baby. And throughout the years, we've interviewed and covered so many different stories about women in different sectors. And I think this is a good representation of women in Hong Kong and the different disciplines we are represented in. And throughout the years, each anniversary, we would honor 10 women from across the different sectors in Hong Kong, who we believe were not only just women who were in leadership in the particular sectors. More importantly, these were women who cared about the community. They gave back to community, and they gave back to the next generation. And this is really what inspired all of us to establish the JESS Network. Officially, we established it last year, but it's been a community of 200 plus women for the last 2 decades. And it was more for us, I think, also a COVID-inspired move for us to pull together all these women and be able to really chase our goal, our mission, which is to connect, to inspire, and to empower women. And I think one of the topics which we really wanted to cover this year was in relation to women in technology. Throughout the years, we've had different awardees who represented the tech sector. We've had scientists, people in medicine. We even had a NASA scientist. But we felt that it was really important for us this year to give more recognition and more coverage and exposure to women in the field of technology. And in the month of May, we launched our Crypto Women Trailblazers campaign. And this was particularly exciting for us because although crypto is going through a cold stage spell right now, the technology of blockchain and its applications is here to stay. And I think through doing the interviews, my team, myself, we learned so much. And I think that's what we aim to do. It's about empowering people. And the first step to empowering is knowledge. And also, I think when we were interviewing all these different women representing different parts of blockchain, I learned that these women are eager to give back to community. They're small, a small group. Women are very, 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 very underrepresented in that sector, but they work together. They're happy to meet and work with other women. They see the stereotypical challenges of being a woman in a male-dominated sector as difficult, but as an opportunity for them to excel and demonstrate not only their technical skills, but also the soft skills. So all of this is really exciting for me, and I'm so happy to have both of you here today with us to share a little bit more. So perhaps, Lisa, you could tell us a little bit about the Women's Foundation and all the work that you guys do.
Sure. So, and thank you, Jessica, for having me here. And I think, sort of your network's, mission around connecting and inspiring and empowering really resonates with TWF. So we're 18 years old. Our mission is to improve the lives of women and girls here in Hong Kong. And we do this through a series of programs, education, research, and advocacy. And we have 3 goals. So the first one is challenging gender stereotypes, which is particularly acute in STEM, and we'll be talking about that. Advancing women leaders, and empowering women in poverty. And so I think because we often get asked the question, why it is we do the work that we do when you're in a city that on the surface seems like it has equal opportunity for everybody. I hope you don't mind, I want to take a couple minutes and just kind of give a really short lay of the land in terms of gender inequality and some of the challenges that women face. You know, in the workforce, for instance, women on average earn 15% less than men. You know, in our boardrooms, you know, only 16.2% of our board directors on listed companies are women, which is, you know, almost half of what it is in other international financial centers, and lower than a lot of our Asian neighbors. Well, that's a surprise. Yeah. Singapore is doing better. Malaysia is doing better. And so, you know, there's a serious motherhood penalty in the workplace. So there was a survey that had more than 50% of employers saying they wouldn't hire women with children, which is startling. And I think we've all seen from the pandemic that women still shoulder the brunt of caregiving responsibilities, whether that be children or the elderly. And a lot of times that leads to them either moving into part-time work or dropping out of the workforce altogether. And for those that stay in the workplace, they're still kind of grappling with a lot of issues around visibility, around sponsorship, around, you know, mentoring. And obviously, there is still an issue around sexual violence and harassment. So 1 out of 3 women, you know, in their lifetime will face sexual violence. So, you know, I think it's all of these issues combined, right, that really drives us and our work. And so, you know, it's really why we work with girls to inspire them to pursue sort of STEM subjects as viable kind of degrees at universities and careers. We also run quite a few programs to support women to excel and advance in the workplace, to take up leadership positions. It's also why we engage men. And so we have a Male Allies initiative. It's a network of 200 senior male business leaders. And it's important because gender equality benefits everyone. It's not just benefiting women, right? And so, you know, being able to have everybody sort of in this ecosystem contributing back to that is so important. And so for us, like, to have any type of sustainable long-term change, we're an organization of 22 people. And so it's impossible for us to do by ourselves. So that's why, you know, it's so lucky that we have, you know, these hundreds of advocates out there really carrying on this mission. And it's why we try and connect kind of the dots between our advocacy and our programs, and then these, you know, champions of ours, you know, through creating new communities, you know, to really drive home this idea that gender equality is possible. We can all work towards it, and we can all get there. And so, you know, STEM is a big part of that. And so looking forward to chatting.
Thank you. And Belinda, perhaps from you now about women in tech.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me. And thank you so much for taking a deep dive already in all the stats and everything. And yeah, it's really shocking. I think in the tech force, 25% of people working in tech are female. The numbers are even lower in Asia. And back in 2017, a group of women and also males came together back then on discussing females in tech. And out of this little breakfast, Women in Tech was born, Women Tech APAC. So we're a community of females in tech within APAC, mainly in Hong Kong. We also have quite a few in Singapore, and also some people now are in Silicon Valley, but still part of this broader community doing business here in Asia. What we do is that we really wanted to create a community of women that come together to challenge the status quo and to really get stuff done, because we saw a lot of, you know, there's a lot of buzz and a lot of talk around it. And we really wanted to from like the bottom, like really change things. And what I mean by that is, for example, we, from like the talks that you saw, especially a few years ago, where you only saw males on it, we call them panels, male only panels, where when we contacted event organizers and we asked like, why is there no female? Like you have your event promo, there's 15 male faces, and how come there's no female, or maybe just one or two? And they're always like, come up with the excuse, we could not find a female that wanted to speak. And when we asked them, we're like, if we give you, if you tell us what you need and we help you to find them, will you then put them on? And they're like, yes. So we actually really did not want to give anybody an excuse anymore. And we also knew that just by pointing the finger at people, you can't create change. We really needed to work together and collaborate, and really to handle them and be like, create a form, we're going to share it, we're going to make sure you're going to get like those females, but what you need to do is you really need to also see it. And I think by really raising awareness about it, people started to see and people start to notice. It's still a long way to go, but it's somewhere to start. Another thing that we really saw is that, women, they often get left out when it comes to manager positions, or they are not considered immediately. So we really wanted to change that also and really open up the conversation. If somebody is hiring, to be like, hey, I'm looking for this role, apply. It does not mean that they're hiring only a female or a male, but at least we opened up more opportunities to have a fair, game around that. So yeah, we've been there for 5 years. We've done a lot of work also in the past on like events, really on raising more awareness. But what we really do is from the bottom up, build this collaborative community of females supporting each other.
Can I ask, how big is your community now?
So we have over 1,000 members. Yeah, and anyone can join. That's female. Yeah, we work together also with males as an ally, but not as part of the community itself, because we also acknowledge that you need both. You need every gender to be part of this conversation. But obviously the community is actually to empower women. Yeah,
and when we say tech, it's not just tech as a blockchain tech.
It's not just tech as a blockchain. It could be, it could be marketing tech. It could be basically anything that's tech related, or anybody also that shows interest in tech outside of their day job. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So because we also
would fall in. We could.
Yeah, definitely. Fiona is a member of Women Tech. Yeah.
Okay. So maybe to go into a bit more of the hardcore stuff, now that we've had a little introduction about the work which you do. I mean, I think we all accept that technology as a sector is stereotypically male dominated. I mean, in our conversation earlier on, as a child, I love the sciences. My favorite subject was chemistry. At some point when we were choosing careers, I wanted to study chemistry, but that was pretty much thrown out the window for multiple typical Hong Kong family reasons. But obviously now the government recognizes that, globally governments recognize the importance of STEAM as a subject, as part of education, especially for women. But the inequalities still exist. So in terms of developing a career in tech, in Hong Kong or in the APAC, what kind of challenges are there other than the ones that you were sharing with us just now?
I mean, of course, there's, the stigmas around, when you hire and you see that somebody's female, there's already a lot of different stigmas from like, does she know as much as a male peers, like unconscious biases also around it. Or for example, oh, she's female, she's in her 30s, she might have kids soon. If she's not having kids yet, how can she perform? There's all these unconscious biases where you try to also educate people around it. Then obviously there's also the pay gap also. But I think one of the things that we can change really around getting more females in there is really what you mentioned in the beginning. Work on the knowledge and education from the beginning, but also empowering people throughout their life, like females, that they can be whatever they want to be. And, it's not society holding them back.
Yeah, so
please go ahead.
I mean, I'm just building on some of what Belinda's saying, and it's so interesting that you said that, you were interested in STEM, you were discouraged from it. It's the same with me. Actually, I was very interested in genetics. I, really wanted to do that. And I felt that the environment wasn't all that supportive, you know, and this is 20 plus years ago. And sadly, you know, the reality hasn't changed that much. And so I think when we talk about what are some of the challenges to women in STEM, you really have to go back a lot further, right? And look at primary school students, look at secondary school students. And, you know, so we conducted research a few years ago looking at whether or not there's any gender differences in how secondary school students see STEM subjects in Hong Kong. And it was really interesting because boys were 3 times more likely to say that they were interested in pursuing a STEM related university degree and 4 times more likely to say they're going to go into a STEM career. And it's really unfortunate because we're looking at, you know, we looked at the numbers and the same numbers of girls and boys are high achievers in STEM. But when you look at how girls perceive their own performance, they always see themselves as being somehow less than in terms of when it comes to science, technology, engineering, mathematics, all 4 of them.
I
They
was
rate
top of my class in
themselves.
all those subjects.
No, I mean, as in they're taking the marks,
But when women
but
perceive
when
themselves,
they still think that they're doing worse than the boys. And
confidence.
so it's the confidence, there's these self-limiting beliefs that somehow I'm just not good at this subject, even if I'm getting really high marks. And so, you know, and so, and I think that, you know, the research showed it's also really supported by your environment, right? So your teachers and your parents who often may not have kind of that, you know, background to really think about, okay, there's all of these amazing possibilities in STEM, and you can look at very creative ways of thinking about really pursuing it. And so I think that some of these, you know, sort of beliefs really need to be tackled, you know, really kind of early on.
For example, also back when I was a kid and I was at school, there was a track for boys to do like crafts, like they were working together with woods, building cool houses, and girls were put into a girls' class to do knitting and sewing. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you know, it starts there. There's also studies that shown that up until like I think the age of 8 or something, girls still, you know, yeah, they did not form already those limiting beliefs, but afterwards they start forming them also that then, yeah, because up until that point they perceive like in mathematics and all STEM related same, but then obviously they feel the society and all the pressure that comes. Yeah.
So do you think things have changed now at all with how the government supports STEM subjects for all and empowering young girls? No, I guess I'm looking at your faces.
No, I mean, so we conducted this research only like 3 years ago. So the data is not that old. But, you know, I think a lot of it, you know, is looking at from kind of a ecosystem perspective of, you know, there is an emphasis on STEAM from the government, but it's not looking at some gender specific challenges there. There's no gender lens given to that curriculum. And so, for instance, like we know that actually girls more than boys, they want a career that's meaningful. They want a career that makes a difference, right? But they don't see STEM as offering that. They don't see tech as offering that. And so there's a disconnect, right? Okay. And so how do you, and there's so many possibilities in tech, right? Like it's incredible from like medicine to education to architecture, anything, right? Is so creative. And so what we're not doing in our curriculums is linking that. And so if you can bridge that, right, in some of your activities and how you're actually talking about the subjects, right, then you're going to get girls really interested. And so things like that, you know, and I'm sure you have other examples.
I just wanted to build on this because, yeah, if you talk about education, like think about an astronaut, think about a billionaire, think about, you know, successful people. Most of the time you think of males. And I think, you know, like even like this unconscious bias also within the kids that, you know, if you would be like naming a female scientist, they would have more issues than, you know, they probably immediately think of Einstein. Would they think of Marie Curie? Probably not immediately. So it's really also changing this unconscious bias and giving these females more role models. So that's something that's really needed, that they can associate themselves with like, oh, it's actually possible for me. It's actually possible for me to do it and to be able to identify themselves and see like other females that they are like, oh, she's the same like me. She got the same like me. She can do it. I can do it too.
Exactly. And it's the media as well, right?
Yes.
So like there was the Gina Davis Institute did just a study last year, and they were looking at STEM characters on TV shows, and there are twice as many, boy STEM
Scientists.
characters than there are female, and 2/3 of the leaders in sort of STEM on TV are men. And so what are girls really looking up to? What are they consuming? What are those messages, right? So so we absolutely need more.
It starts in with like comics, Dexter, he as a scientist, not the brother, but he's male and he has this annoying sister, but girls are portrayed as the annoying sister. Already like, it already starts with like, media and everything. And, for boys, it's like, in the branding, if you look at marketing, boys are like cool, manly, like really like how stuff is targeted. Girls are like pink, flowery and everything. That's how packaging, it's already targeted at like kids. I think that there's a lot of change that needs to be done already at this young age because kids perceive it unconsciously, if not unconsciously.
So what you guys know and the research that you conduct and the community of women and men who also share this vision, how can we all collectively help to make things change? Just so that people are more aware, children are more aware. Are there any programs which either of your associations run to help enable young women?
You want to start? Yeah, with million.
Sure. Well, we have two major ones, I guess, that really try and change some of these attitudes. And so the first one that we built is called Girls Go Tech, and it's targeting secondary school girls. It's a free program because also one thing that we didn't talk about, right, is how many more challenges there are for underprivileged populations when it comes to access to STEM. Because they have less access to resources, they have less access to support, they're going to have less, I think, understanding of how this will directly benefit their future. So we wanted a program that really gives these girls these opportunities. And so it's an online platform actually that they can learn different programming languages and coding and engineering. And
how do you qualify to join that platform? I mean, it's as in.
I mean, it's free. It's open.
So like, if I was a secondary school student, I could sign up.
Yes, so we do have school partners as well. So we go to school partners, we tell them about our program, and then they sort of promote it among their female population. And then they have there's online tutors to kind of help them when they get stuck. But it's also sort of paired with in-person or virtual activities that they can go visit companies and see how, like, for instance, tech is contributing to sustainability efforts, which can be quite cool. They also get to meet like senior female tech leaders, so they can have that visibility. So they can be like, oh yeah, I could be like that. I can do this. I could run this company. I could, and it's quite, I think for them, it just makes it really interesting. But we also work with the teachers and we work with the schools around this idea of really looking at their curriculums and making sure, that they are looking at that there's no gender stereotyping, that looking at ways of diversifying it, making it a bit more interesting. And they also on this platform can exchange STEM curricula to be like, oh, okay, we've tried this, it's worked really well, like here it is, it's open source, which is really nice. So we've had, really good feedback on that. We've been running it for about 7 years, and some of the girls, we have like these great stories of them, going on to pursue this in university, and then beyond that, going into sort of STEM related careers. So it's really nice. And we also have another program that looks at primary school girls. And so it's called our digital literacy program. And it's working with girls and their parents together.
I
So they
think that's
do their
important.
workshops
Yes,
together
yes.
so that the parents
Are
can
also
see
literate.
how it like relates to everyday life, right? That tech, has these everyday applications that it can be fun. Their girls are interested. But also we do parent workshops around things like internet safety and making sure that they can create a safe space for their daughter to pursue this online. And so that's kind of been for us, like really trying to build that pipeline of girls who will become young women entering into these fields. So.
Amazing. One thing that, or one of the initiatives that I've done also apart from Women Tech was a mentoring network for high school and university girls, because I really saw the gap. Also being half Hong Kong myself, having a local family here, I experienced also, the local like pressure on like women or girls on it's not just, I always say that with females, with girls in Hong Kong, they don't just have to excel on an academic level the same as men, but also they have to look, they also have the looks and everything, like the appearance and everything that's on top of that, where it's like, where it's so appropriate here to like, go up to somebody and be like, oh, yeah, or meaning like, oh, you look thick or like fat, and while you have dinner, and then in the next tone say like like eat more. So I think that for me that like was really something coming from like Europe, where I was like pointing at my uncle and being like, get a six-pack and then we talk. I have the luxury to say that because I was because I take myself out of like this and I'm just like, who are you to tell me that? But I know that a lot of girls don't have that luxury. So what I really saw that these girls, especially local girls in Hong Kong, they really need like a big sister to talk to, career-wise and, where they want to go. That is more unbiased than, for example, the parents that have a really clear path probably in their head of what their kid should do, even though it's not the kid's passion probably. So I started a mentoring network for women and that the mentors were under 40. And so they're really like a big system matching them together with high school and university students on really, consulting them more around their career, or if there was a university that they wanted to go to, we partnered up with companies like Microsoft, Starbucks, and to talk about, for example, with Starbucks about like marketing tech, loyalty, with Microsoft around AI. We also did hackathons with Cyberport. But what I really saw by doing this was like how important it, it really is for these young girls, especially if they're local, to have somebody else to talk to outside of the little bubble.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things we will be aiming to do also with the JESS network. I mean, like I was saying, we have 200 plus women from very different disciplines. And they all say, we wish we had somebody to talk to. I mean, sometimes it's not even career advice. It's just need to talk. Women like to talk.
Yeah.
The talking helps to solve the problem, because probably most of the time we actually have the solution in our heads.
Yeah.
But talking sort of reinforces it, and then you get feedback from others. And I guess being able to create that safe space for women is also very important, especially for young women. So just another sharper question, say, do you have any career advice specific to women who want to join the tech sector?
Just do it. Career advice. Oh my God. I think that at the end of the day, I always say also, while tech is really important, ask yourself if it's your passion. I think for me, it's important that somebody is not just like studying STEM because they think that it's trendy or it's hip. For me, people really need to be interested in what they're doing. If you really are interested in sewing and fashion, there's nothing wrong if,
it could also be very techy.
Exactly. It could, but also if you're not interested in the tech part at all, that's totally fine too. But I think for me, the most important advice I could give to somebody is really like, what are you passionate about and how can you leverage that? And obviously, if there's a way to leverage it within tech, or if it's really tech related, then do it. And if you want to actually break into like a tech field that you have no clue about because you're currently working in a completely different field, I mean, the internet is your best friend. You just have to Google, you can do courses, you can open LinkedIn and actually talk to people who are actually in the profession that you want to enter and ask them for advice. And I think that's so easy nowadays to just open the dialogue up and message people and be like, hey, do you have 5 minutes? I want to ask more about your role and what advice you would give me. Nobody would say no.
Yeah, it's true. And I think, what you're saying about, talking to as many people as possible, being prepared, knowing what you're coming into, right? Because there are, obviously, it is still a male-dominated sector. You're going to have, different challenges going in. But I think also, in addition to what we can, say to women to help them be more prepared, we also need to be talking to companies about how they create a workplace that supports, their female employees, right? And really that idea of around inclusivity. And so I think, a lot of, for every organization, particularly tech, but all of them, it's around like doing an internal audit to be like, okay, where are your pain points around gender inequality? So if you find that, okay, well, we simply can't get sufficient numbers of women in this particular, if it's cloud computing or whatever it is, to join the organization, well, okay, look at your recruitment practices. What criteria are you listing in your recruitment ads? What kind of language are you using? What kind of platforms? Can you diversify the platforms that you're using, to reach a broader kind of swath of women to join? And, it could be other things. It could be around pay transparency.
Breastfeeding room.
There we go.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different layers. And, it's not just about getting these females into the door, but it's actually about retaining them and also offering them solutions to also keep them after, for example, they give birth, if they choose to, or, if they want to freeze their eggs, things like that. There's so many different layers.
Yeah, and that open communication too about things like this, right, with your reporting line manager, but also coming from, the very top of your leadership that's setting the tone to be like, yes, it's really important to us that gender diversity at our organization is contributing to the great work that we're doing and the products that we're producing and, all of this stuff, that has to be part of that messaging so that everybody feels supported to be able to do their best work and they want to stay there.
Companies also starting to do menstrual leave, for example. And so I think that slowly we're moving ahead. We're moving along, even if it's sometimes really at snail speed or most of the time. But it's better than just standing still. Yeah,
exactly. We're having increasing conversations too around things like menopause, right? Because that comes, at a time in a woman's career, when she's usually at a position where she's going to step into senior leadership. And she's going through all of these life changes and doesn't feel like she can talk about it, and it affects, how she perceives your confidence, right, in yourself, because all these things are happening. How do you explain things like hot flashes to your manager, and these are all conversations that we should start really opening up and having at companies so that you don't have women who then decide, I'm going to retire early rather than, take up the mantle to really go into positions of leadership and decision making.
And if we go into education, it's not just educating about STEM, but also sexual education, so that men also understand more around females. And for example, it's not mandated from the Education Bureau to have sexual education in schools here in Hong Kong. So that's also pretty shocking.
There's still a long way to go, but I think, like we were saying, conversation is the start, being aware and then moving on forwards from there. So today other than talking about women in tech, I think one of the things that I think is really interesting about the work that both of you do is building communities. I think we all believe in the power of communities to be able to make changes, to be able to share ideas. So perhaps could you share a little bit more about how you built your community, what challenges you faced, what successes you've seen, and how has tech helped you to build these communities?
I think often when people want to start something, whether it's a company, a community, or something, they tend to overthink it rather than just doing it. So I think that Yeah, I know it's so much easier said than done. But for example, what really kickstarted it for us was just creating this WhatsApp group and just taking things from there, something as simple as that. And then, what followed then was like, Slack, Airtable database, and like utilizing technology really to organize the community, to blast things out there, and to really, streamline also all the information. But I think that if somebody wants to start something, just go with the easiest way, and then you can always pivot. But I think that the main part is just to start it.
And I think we've all kind of seen over the past couple of years with COVID just how important tech is, right? It's been the one thing that we can all agree that's kept us connected, right? In our personal lives, in our professional lives, right? And I think it's also in thinking about it, from a TWF perspective, is how much you can then use tech to in service of a lot of problems in the community, and so we found through like our girls in our Girls Go Tech program is that they engaged in different competitions to create apps or prototypes for things that would immediately help build kind of that resilience and well-being in the Hong Kong community. And it was lovely. They created things like there's a smart like medicine dispenser reminder for like elderly that they created that kind of speaks to, I think just understanding that they have the agency to really make change now and contribute back to the community through technology. So I think it's one thing is, building these communities through tech, but also then just being able to serve the community through tech. I think in a lot of different ways that we found, very kind of, just inspiring and enlivening. We've learned a lot actually from our participants as well.
And through COVID, tech accelerated so many things. I mean, apart from the health part, but I think within, education, I think so many things. I mean, obviously not everything was like great for like, kids being stuck for 2 years at home, having to like virtually learn everything. But I think that generally with tech, it really enabled people to be more flexible, and also more flexible also in terms of building communities, because everybody was just everywhere, and people had a smartphone or something to actually be able to connect. And we also did several different webinars or series during COVID where we just brought women together again on a virtual level.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same with us, as we had to sort of completely, I think, pivot some of our programs from being completely in person to online in a very short period of time.
Did that hold you guys back because you couldn't do things in person?
No, so actually, I mean, I think in some ways there's a silver lining to the pandemic in that it accelerated our sort of digital strategy plans. So we've been talking for a long time about how we need to be more, we need to, integrate tech, more into all of our programs. And we, were very motivated once COVID hit. And we were able to sort of quickly do some rethinking and restructuring of some of the content for our programs, learn what engages people online, right? Which is very different from what engages you in person. How do you keep people, like what are different ways to make sure that you can still maintain that connection, right? With your different, programs and initiatives. And I think we were lucky in that it ended up, working out fairly well. And so even now, even though we're slowly going back to in-person, we're keeping some hybrid elements, from that period where we were completely online. And, with everybody obviously traveling and quarantine requirements and all of that, like it's still just, so necessary to have online components where you can just, be maintain those relationships and connections.
I mean, even for us today, normally the Leaders Forum is an in-person event. We'd be at a hotel with about 100 guests right in front of you.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is a different experience for us. But I think, again, I think like the Women's Foundation, we were forced to rethink how we were going to build our community virtually. I mean, in terms of producing or creating content on different media platforms. My teams, throughout the last 5 years, they really evolved. But even what we're doing today, all of this is a learning experience, but push to do it. And for this, I'm thankful, because it just means that means we're without borders. We're not limited to Hong Kong. I mean, our vision has always been Greater China, and then now, because with languages that we Greater China, APAC, you know, the world, and then Mars, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it just, I think it gives a lot of opportunities, and tech has been in our favor. But then at the same time, I suppose there are always things to think about, because tech makes things so easy accessible. Then there are other concerns to be thinking of in terms of what's safe, what's not safe.
Attention span of people.
Oh,
Like with
yeah.
tech, you really have to take out all the fluff, because you know that you lose people as soon as they get bored.
Yeah.
I find that I consume information in a very different manner now. I mean, back in school, but read stuff, it go in my brain and it stay there. When I see things on the screen, it does not go into my brain. It sort of, I think it stays like at the front and then just goes out again. If it's really important, it'll go to the back. But most of the time, it just does not sink in anymore, which I don't enjoy. That's the only part of consuming information that I in the new tech world that I do not enjoy. I like it when you read things, it stays in your brain. But I guess it's just the new generation.
It's like overload in terms of like information.
Exactly.
And I think that's also the reason why things stay less likely in your brain than before.
Yeah. Oh, and another interesting question that I wanted to ask you guys. So with blockchain technology, with Web3, do you see it changing the way we build communities, especially for empowering women? How do you see Web3 in your next, let's say, 103-year plan? Because then we don't know what's going to happen after that.
Let's wait and see. No, I think that definitely it really helps to empower. But I think if we talk about empowerment and, you know, reaching females or reaching young girls, we also have to think about, especially if we talk about like metaverse, Web3, blockchain, and all of that. It requires a device, and especially if you want to, you know, reach maybe underprivileged girls or communities. Do they have a device? Do they have access to internet? So, you know, it's always a question about like, who can you actually reach with these mediums? For example, on projects that I'm working on with my company, you know, if we want to reach, for example, communities, specific communities like in Africa, we have to do it by radio to really, you know, like to really like be able to reach, for example, these like younger generations. So I just want to add on that, like, it's great that it's coming, but we also don't need to forget that there are communities out there that don't have access to that. And we also need to enable them at one point to be able to reach and join that.
Yeah, and I think it's also, in addition to accessibility, it's also the safety aspect. You know, I think some of these are all very exciting kind of developments in spaces that have so much possibility, right? But they're new, fairly unregulated. And so it's looking at too, how do you make these spaces safe for children, if you're having children, you know, explore this, but, you know, also for women who are subject to so much more online harassment than men. What does that look like in these spaces? How do you actually create, rather than, you know, I think sometimes the onus is put on the woman, you know, to make sure that she's put in all the controls, put in all of the, you know, like different, you know, settings to make sure that these things won't happen, rather than when you're designing these spaces, thinking about, okay, what is this experience like for everybody who's using it, and how do we make this, you know, a safe, comfortable experience where people can really kind of express themselves.
Yeah, how can everybody be the authentic self? And there's already been incidents in the metaverse where women get sexually harassed. So, you know, what are companies doing against that?
Yeah, I think there are so many opportunities, but I think at the same time, I guess it's what regulators think about. It's also not the risks involved, but the other things that you have to consider. Yeah, with technology. So we have some interesting questions from the audience. I have to translate this, so just give me. It's in Chinese. I have to translate it into English. Okay, it's for you. So according to research data, other than the tech sector, what other industries is the gender equality balance really lopsided? And compared to other sectors, is the gender balance particularly and obvious in the tech sector? And in the long run, other than education, can you think of other ways of helping to reduce this inequality? This is how long the question is, and I managed to make it so long.
25 questions in one. Sorry, down. Exactly. Well, I think also the Belinda way in as well. Yeah, so, you know, I think, you know, in comparison with other industries, if we're thinking about, I think that the interesting, almost every industry, let's put it this way, there is a gender imbalance. There are very few industries where you're going to see absolute gender equality at every single level of the organization. So even in a female-dominated industry like fashion, right, where women are both the majority of consumers, and they tend to be, you know, the majority of those who are entering into this industry. But when you look at the levels of leadership, it's still male dominated.
And what's that?
Well, this is the question. You know, it really comes down to, you know, networks and visibility, and, you know, it's still, there are these entrenched old boys networks of when you see and hear someone who looks more like you, there's biases around, you know, these promotion processes, things that, you know, Belinda was mentioning and I was mentioning around obviously childcare and elderly care. And when that happens in your career and you take a step back and you take a few years out, and when you come back on, how well are you supported to really, one, pick up where you left off, have a clear path to your leadership level. I think that that's really something that, so in addition to education, you know, I think that that's something that organizations can really be thinking about is, so in terms of not just education can help in terms of that initial entry into the industry, but again, this retention issue, this promotion issue, this making sure that, you know, the organization is really committed, I think, to having a gender equal workforce is going to require a lot more work in so many different places at their organization. But I think we all know, you know, like the benefits that brings, right? So, you know, the research on that has been around for over a decade, showing that, you know, when you have more gender equality, you have, you know, better revenue, you have more innovation, you have happier employees, right? So why would you not want these things? So, you know, it's really kind of focusing on building some of these positives at an organization as well.
I take the question on how obvious it is that there's a lack of females in tech. I mean, not just tech, but generally only 3% of funding when it comes to startups and VCs goes to actually female, only 3% generally. And for example, if you look at the FTSE index listing the 100 most successful like CEOs of companies, it's more, it's actually more common to be called David or Steve than to be females. So there are more people called David or Steve that are CEOs than females.
David and Steve, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have no sons, so I guess, yeah, no Davids, no Steve in my family.
They can always pick on their
Second name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stephanie, Steve.
Pretty cool. Here's another question. This is for you, Belinda. So Hong Kong compared to other Asian countries, women in tech, are we behind them? Like, for example, like in India, the technological advances or the opportunities are abroad. So are we really behind in Hong Kong?
I think that generally in Asia, there's general advancement happening. I mean, if you look at India, India, you know, is on such a different scale in terms of how many people live in India compared to Hong Kong.
Yes.
So obviously it might seem like there are more, but then if you look at how many people are actually educated in India, you know, and how many girls are actually able to go beyond, you know, if they're lucky to exit high school with a degree and they're not getting married off immediately. So, you know, there's like, I think like if you take India, so many other things happening.
Yes.
So no, Hong Kong is not the worst. It's not the best. It's just, you know, somewhere there where it's easier to affect change than in a really developing country. Because I also lived a year in the Philippines and worked for the UN there. So it's really like different battles that are fought in these developing countries compared to, for example, countries like Singapore or Hong Kong, where change is happening. It's happening not as fast as we wish it would, but it's still happening more than, for example, in countries like India or Indonesia.
So for women in Hong Kong who are in the tech sector, how do we get ourselves into the global scene to be competitive in the global scene? That was one of the follow-up questions.
I always love how collaborative Hong Kong is, how it's really easy to actually open up your LinkedIn, for example, and message somebody. And if you really send them a sincere message with whatever ask you have, people are willing to help you. And it's something that I experienced myself firsthand when I started my own business several years ago. And that was something that was really warming to me, how the community comes together. So I think that, for example, in Hong Kong, if you want to get your name out on a global level, or if you want to meet global players, it's really easy to actually connect with people in the field that you're interested in on a Hong Kong level first, and then look into, you know, set up a game plan on how to achieve that global awareness that you're targeting.
And the Women's Foundation, do you work towards helping the local community bridge with the regional or global community?
So actually all of our programs are just Hong Kong. But everything about sort of gender equality and women's empowerment obviously connects on a larger level. Yes. So for instance, if we talk about women on boards, so we do a lot of work to try and get more women appointed to boards. And I think to your point too, around what you were saying about, you know, reaching out to talk to people, it's also about just doing it, just taking a risk, like putting your hand up, right? So a lot of women who are very qualified for these boards won't raise their hands, you know, that they don't feel prepared, you know, enough to sit on these boards. So, you know, we work with them to help them understand, okay, these are the mechanics of the boards. This is how you know, these are some of, you know, the governance issues you might come across, like to help them feel more comfortable with it. And so that they can honestly, you know, put up their hand, but it's also being able to facilitate those connections, to break down kind of these more male-dominated networks. And so for our board work, a lot of times they'll be appointed to Hong Kong companies, but they might be appointed outside of Hong Kong as well. So in that sense, we do kind of have a little bit of connection.
Now we have a question for both of you. Around the globe, there have been many campaigns in terms of trying to break the bias about achieving gender equality. Have there been any campaigns which you've seen which you've really been wowed by? And why?
Wow, that's a good question. From the audience. I mean, all questions have been really good.
To think about this.
I think that often companies have to really think beyond International Women's Day, because that's like the 1 month in the year where it's so over promoted. Like, you know, it's like in June right now, LGBT month, where every company has a rainbow there. And I feel like in March, you know, every company is like shouting out like, we empower females, we empower women, but it needs to go beyond there. And I think maybe that's where we're both thinking, like, you know, what initiatives are there where it's not just like female washing, like, you know, beyond that one.
Yeah, I'm trying to think around, you know, I think these campaigns are really important for raising awareness. But I always think the issue is then how do you take that awareness and then convert it into action?
Yeah.
You know, and so that's something that we work on, right? So we launched a campaign last year around raising awareness around sexual violence. And it was really around this idea of the fact that it is so pervasive in Hong Kong, but people don't really recognize it. And taking the onus again off of the victim and saying that, well, actually, we all need to come together to support, you know, victims so that they don't feel stigmatized.
Yeah.
And so, but for us, it's not just running this campaign. It's okay, we have a whole set of, you know, conversations and discussions that we have with companies around, okay, how do you make safer workplaces? And then discussions, you know, that of points that we raise with the government of, okay, how can we create a better legal laws that protect, you know, victims so much better. And then it's looking at, okay, well, as individuals, as family members, as friends, like these are some of the behaviors that you can adopt and some of the ways that you can really support somebody in your life around this. So I think it's around, there are incredible, you know, sort of earth-shattering campaigns around the world, and it's looking at, okay, well then, if it's left this impression on you, then how do you go take that message and actually convert that into something that's going to make, you know, larger ripple effects kind of where you are.
And also, just because you can't see something on social media does not mean that it's not happening.
Yeah.
You're talking about like campaign. basically, you're talking about campaign. You're basically talking about like what was the most viral thing or anything. But I can think of so many grassroots things that people are doing to empower females on a global level that are not really shouty on social media.
Yeah. I mean, we are in media, therefore social media is important for us, but I think for the Jess Network, it's really about getting our feet on the ground and getting things done. It's not just talking. The talking is important. That's step one.
Yeah.
But then you've got to have the execution. And I think we're all on the same page. So that's great. One last question. I'm doing a lot of translation today. For the both of you, if you had to say one thing, one phrase, what would you say to encourage the audience, the women in the audience, in terms of pursuing their dreams? Just one thing.
Just do it. I think the only person that's holding you back is probably yourself and your limiting beliefs. So, you know, we talked about it earlier when you said that females, if they get asked to join boards, they often don't believe in themselves because they have imposter syndrome. So really stop these beliefs of thinking that you are not enough to do something, but actually do it, because males, if they fit a job description, 30%, they're going to apply for it. Females need to at least fulfill 80% until they feel confident. So just do it.
We're too harsh on ourselves.
Yeah.
Sounds like.
And if you have limiting beliefs, think about what a man would do, and you know, if they would do it. So why don't you do it?
I love it.
I think on top of that, it's also be persistent and keep an open mind, because sometimes when you have, you know, you're trying to get from point A to point B, there are a million ways to get there. So if one way doesn't work, try the next way and try the next way and keep trying, because there's always going to be different challenges and barriers that arise. And there are always ways that you can actually go ahead and accomplish really what you've set out to do.
And bring your own chair for that seat on the table.
I will definitely be telling my kids this. They was like, why are these chairs you can't sit on, these malls, because they're pieces of art? It's for women who want to bring their own chairs. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, ladies. Thank you for, yeah, it's me again. Thank you for your sharing. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Belinda. One question from me, from the male perspective or as a partner's perspective, okay? How are the hubbies and partners playing their roles in supporting their wives and empowering them and making sure that they can go do whatever they want to do to achieve their dreams?
Take care of the kids. Carry them out, stay at home.
Yeah, I love this question. Yeah, exactly. It's sharing the household responsibilities, you know, in a way that works for your family. So really, if that's childcare, if that's elder care, if that's, you know, and any kind of, you know, responsibility split, but also for all of you that are, you know, supportive husbands, also be supportive managers and supportive bosses, right? Really use that influence to then look at your company and be like, okay, well, maybe we need a gender neutral parental leave so that, you know, my male colleagues have the same choice as my female colleagues in being able to be at home with their newborn child. Or, you know, if there's often a bit of stigma around you know, if a woman leaves work early because it's assumed she's going to pick up the kids, you know, we always tell men to loudly and proudly announce, like, I'm going to pick up my kids. I'm leaving the office at 4 p.m. to do that, you know, so that it really starts changing that culture and some of those perceptions, you know, that are holding women back kind of in their careers as well.
Yeah, also jokes aside, I think it's really about also educating yourself. Read books like Invisible Women. I think really understand what women are facing. And, you know, there's so much also invisible work that women are doing, whether they have kids or not, around like household chores and everything. So I think that it's also realizing that also. And I don't know, often it feels like it's actually a blind spot that male have, not consciously, but unconsciously. Yeah. So it's really about also changing the ways you do things. And, you know, if you grew up with like a mom that was lucky enough to stay at home, because she wanted to, that's fine. But, you know, I think that, yeah, it's really about educating themselves. And as Lisa just mentioned, also on a corporate level, empower.
Yeah, I think those are really great examples. I mean, from my perspective, my husband is always supportive, but I think they got to listen to us. The women tend to not say too many things. We keep a lot of things to ourselves. The silent things that we do, I think it's just when there's awareness, both as a partner, like you said, at a professional level, just being a bit more aware of the things we do, but we don't flaunt, because that's not the nature of women. And then I think that will go a long way in understanding where we're coming from, both professionally and as women, and that will go a long way. Just getting perspective will go a long way.
All right, thank you, ladies. I'll make sure that goes into the highlight of the video, and it's a teaser. This is the highlight, okay? Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you for all the speakers today. We will have all 3 sections posted on our website later today. Feel free to come back for all the recordings. And thank you again. We do look forward to having Jess Network doing collaboration with the Women's Foundation and Women in Tech in the future. So once again, thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.